When I originally wrote the script for this video, this was originally going to be a video essay on how the communist utopia, formerly known as the USSR, somehow managed to get an American fast food restaurant into their country, which would soon become what we know today as Russia. Whilst this is a very interesting story in itself, things have changed over the past few years. In particular, that things have kind of taken a turn backwards rather than forwards. I'm talking about cheap knockoffs of brands that you know and love. So instead of the Golden Arches, you might just be able to get yourself a nice, delicious, tasty Vanya burger. Hello! Welcome to Brainspill, the laziest show on the internet. My name is Tank, and every time I think of fast food restaurants, the first thing that comes to my mind is, well, Americans. Americans and their deliciously fatty foods. I'm not only talking about the well-known establishments such as McDonald's, but there are many others that come into the fray such as Subway, KFC, Burger King, and so on. In the later half of the 21st century, the USSR was still a thing, with its communist ideals battering down anything from the West as a form of propaganda-style thuggery. So, you would assume that anything westernized coming to the country would be fought against ferociously. Well, back in the day, this wasn't really the case. McDonald's opened their doors in the USSR in January 1990, in which queues formed around several blocks in length just to go to this restaurant. The queue was about 8 to 10 hours long. In comparison to today, when I'm at a McDonald's drive-thru and I'm there between 8 to 10 minutes, I get pretty impatient and go elsewhere. But you have to remember that most people in the modernized world just take these things for granted. This was the first of its kind in communist Russia. So, how did this even happen? At the tail end of the Cold War, it really seemed like this was such an odd thing to happen. One of the most Western things you can think of, fast food, entering the communist USSR. You just wouldn't imagine it. But if you knew the circumstances around what was happening at the time, this actually makes a lot more sense than you first might imagine. And all I'm going to say is if we've got anyone to thank for the takedown of the Red Army, it's this guy. Many Western products and brands were heavily restricted during the time in the USSR, so you wouldn't see someone wearing jeans or eating a burger, for example. It was just potato and vodka. During the warming up of the Cold War period, the Soviet Union and the United States held a Soviet National Exhibition in New York in 1959, where both the United States and the Soviet Union looked to show off their cultural and technological contributions to the world, but more so to each other, attempting to show the other how much better they were. As nice and glamorous as this sounds, this was basically just one big massive dick measuring contest. Many things were on display, such as fashion, ambitions for the future of commercial air travel, modern living, but the standout item more important than anything else was when the Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev was offered some Pepsi. He took the glass, gave it a sip, and actually it's funny because this actually leads into an entirely different Brainspill video which I've already wrote the script for, because that is a whole story in itself, but we'll get back to that at a later date. However, this was important because this was the cultural shift that started to happen. People who had never been experienced to things we take for granted in the Western world were just starting to be introduced to things like Pepsi, for example. And our man really liked Pepsi. The real awakening came when Mikhail Gorbachev became president of the Soviet Union in 1985, the last president before the end of the Soviet Union. The reason for this was his move to a social democracy leading up to the 90s. The Iron Curtain was about to fall, and what was needed was some exposure to what most of the outside world already knew. And yes, that includes very important things such as the removal of barriers for information and censorship, but maybe more important than that was, of course, fast food. Some people might blame Gorbachev himself for the radical change that would soon sweep over Russia, a change which would see the country turn much more in favour towards the West and its culture. Pizza Hut was one of the first restaurants to open in the USSR, but the first restaurant to really demonstrate the shift was, of course, the Golden Arches, McDonald's opening in the USSR. The first restaurant opened in the USSR in 1990 in Pushkinskaya Square in Moscow. Yes, the opportunity to taste something which us capitalist pigs enjoy mainly on a daily basis. This was entirely new and something which I think the people of the USSR really needed something aside from potatoes and vodka. This was the opportunity to experience a small pleasure in life, such as ordering yourself a big dirty burger and fries, only to eat it knowing that it's not good for you. But damn, the salt they put on the chips, it's good. And, even better than that, the secret sauce they put in those Big Macs. I don't know what it is, and frankly, I don't care. I just want to eat one of those Big Macs. Despite the fact that this was something so unknown and unique at the time, opening day was something completely unfamiliar, and the fact that a Big Mac, cheeseburger, apple pie and 2 milkshakes would equal 4 days' salary for the average person in the USSR, people arrived in their droves. I mean, look at these queues. This is record-breaking, in more ways than one. Yes, this was insane. Not only were the queues as long as I mentioned earlier, inside the McDonald's itself, they had 27 cash registers going at the same time, they had 700 seats, and, just to top it all off, on the first day alone, this restaurant served approximately 30,000 people. This record still stands as the most people served in a single McDonald's in a single day. That is record-breaking. This was particularly strange, as after this occurred, the Iron Curtain really started to fall. Many other fast food restaurants and brands would soon join the fray over the coming decades, for this being a new gold rush and for new customers for people to eagerly try out, and well, I think you know where this might be going. Things change, and people change, as Gorbachev, as the last president of the USSR, would leave shortly before the end of the USSR, in the year 1991. And with that, the Soviet Union dissolved and Russia went back to just being Russia. Russia. Yep, that country that we all know and love. And they even have this guy in power now, which I'm sure you all know who this is. So yeah, fast food in Russia is much like many other places around the world where people can freely go out and eat out into various different restaurants and establishments and grab themselves a cheeky snack. But given recent events that have occurred in the past year or so, not pointing any fingers, but yeah, many countries have even started imposing sanctions and restrictions to Russia to try and cripple them and their economy. You know, because of the whole military intervention. But it's not just countries. As part of this effort, many companies have decided to even suspend or straight up even end their business dealings in the country. This includes many fast food restaurants, which in the 90s and early 2000s looked to be the new frontier for all of these restaurants. Times have changed, however, with the biggest of them all, McDonald's, making the ultimate Giga Chad move and making a complete U-turn on this decision, choosing to end all business in the country. So, by doing this, one of the largest restaurants leaving has ultimately led to a vacuum for anybody to come and fill the place of the once infamous McDonald's. And as you might imagine, that was sold to a local buyer pretty quickly. Enter Uncle Vanya, with a logo and branding not too dissimilar from another big company that we've just spoken about. Strange, don't you think? I mean, I don't see anything fishy here, mainly because I imagine that they don't sell the fish fillet burger anymore, but that's just me. So yeah, that's the brief story of how fast food would enter the USSR, or what is now Russia, and then about 32 years later make a complete U-turn. And well, here we are. How times change. If you like the video, be sure to like and subscribe. If you want to be notified as soon as I upload my next video, be sure to hit the bell button. And if you've got any ideas for what topics you'd like me to discuss next, let me know down in the comments below. As always, sources used in the video will be in the description. So, what can we take away from this? Is it the fact that McDonald's was a sign not only of the fact that people were being opened up to a Western market, but at the same time, with the Iron Curtain dropping, being introduced to a more Western lifestyle and culture? Maybe. Does it also mean that with the recent decision of McDonald's to pull out the country, whether there is now a change in direction culturally for the country? Maybe. But I think more importantly than anything, it means that for the companies that have decided to pull out the country, those are the companies that I think you need to be giving the support right now. You know, if you had to make a choice. As there are many companies that have decided to simply carry on trading. And I would implore you to do your own research, find those companies, and make the decision that maybe it's probably a good idea to avoid those companies. Just saying. I'll see you guys in the next video. Fantastic.
Thank you.